March 5th, 1943. Opening his main offensive, Air Marshal Arthur Harris selects Essen for destruction. The great armament center of the Ruhr, Essen is home to the massive Frederick Krupp's works as well as dozens of transportation, coking, iron, steel, engineering, and armaments works. Despite repeated attempts in 1942, little damage has been done to Essen. Dense industrial smog hides the city from RAF bombers, but now Harris stakes his hopes on Oboe, a revolutionary blind bombing device. Across England, orders go out for a maximum effort. 442 bombers are ready by the 6 frontline bomber groups, half of Bomber Command's total bomber strength. 2/3 of this force are made up of the huge 4-engine bombers, but the night's most important aircraft are the Oboe-equipped Pathfinder Mosquitoes, who will mark the massive Krupp works with red target indicators. In order to maximize concentration and minimize the amount of time the bomber stream spends in German radar boxes, Harris's staff chooses a short and direct route to Essen. Only 2 turns are plotted, one off the Dutch coast which the bombers can locate with G, the other north of Essen which will be marked by Pathfinder indicators. At the bases of 8 Group in West Anglia, Pathfinder crews are briefed on the important target marking plan. Much rests on the 8 Oboe Mosquito crews from 109 Squadron. Armed with target indicators, these crews are tasked first with marking the turning point for main force bombers north of Essen with yellow indicators, and then the Krupp's works itself with red indicators. The first Mosquito will drop its red indicators on the Krupp's works at 2100 hours, and the subsequent Mosquitoes will drop their red indicators every 3 to 7 minutes thereafter. 22 Pathfinder crews flying 4-engine bombers will remark the red indicators with their own green indicators every 1 to 2 minutes thereafter to ensure continuous marking of the aiming point. At the main force bomber bases, the apprehensive crews file into the briefing hut to hear where they will be sent tonight. Among those crews is Ron Reed, an experienced Halifax pilot and deputy flight commander in 78 Squadron at Linton-on-Ouse.
Most of us would have plumped for the French submarine bases, and the Italian town, and perhaps the German North Sea ports, where their proximity enabled us to get in and out quickly. The one place that was unlikely to be at the top of anybody's list was the Ruhr.
Also on the battle order for tonight is John Searby, a 106 Squadron flight commander at RAF Syerston. He listens to the briefing made by Squadron Commander Guy Gibson.
Right now, tonight, we're gonna crack those bastards at Krupp's, and I want every single bomb on the pin. This is an opportunity which has never yet come our way, and we're gonna have to make the most of it. This operation is gonna be different from anything we have ever attempted, and Essen will be marked in a way that has so far not been possible. The Pathfinders are gonna drop their markers on the center of Krupp's with an accuracy of less than 100 yards by an entirely new technique. I want an aiming point photograph from every one of you, a picture of Krupp's with your bombs ripping it apart.
94 Halifaxes of 4 and 6 Group will attack in the first wave, bombing from 2102 to 2120 hours. Next, 52 Sterlings and 131 Wellingtons from 1, 3, 4, and 6 Groups will attack in the second wave, bombing from 2115 to 2125 hours. Last are the Lancasters, 157 of them from 1 and 5 Group, bombing from 2120 to 2140 hours. All 442 aircraft are to bomb within 40 minutes, one bomber dropping its ordnance every 5 seconds. Concurrently, a small force of 3 Halifaxes and 4 Wellingtons from 4 Group will drop 1,500-pound sea mines off the Frisian Islands, part of Bomber Command's mine-laying campaign against German merchant shipping. As the briefings are concluded, the bomber crews file out to the change house to prepare for the operation. For many crews, this period is the most frightening. You can't stand still. You laugh at the smallest jokes, loudly, stupidly. You smoke far too many cigarettes, usually only halfway through, and then throw them away. Sometimes you feel sick and want to go to the lavatory. The smallest incidents annoy you, and you flare up at the slightest provocation. All this because you are frightened, scared stiff. Across the channel, Luftwaffe night fighter pilots begin their own routines as they settle in for the night's watch, reading, playing cards, and otherwise passing the time. The crews are often kept at readiness when weather conditions suitable for RAF bombing raids are forecasted. The constant waiting tests their nerves, but for those pilots skilled in hunting RAF bombers, there is also the eagerness to come to grips with their foes. Back in England, the bomber crews load into their aircraft, testing their equipment for the flight ahead. Engines rumble to life and the bombers roll out from their dispersal areas. As the green lights flash, Merlin and Hercules engines roar as the heavily laden bombers thunder down the runway for Germany. Simultaneously, ground mandrel stations on the coast of England blast forth electronic interference to reduce the range of the German early warning Freya radars. Mandrel-equipped RAF bombers join in, seeking to impair the German Freyas further inland. With the Germans' early warning system degraded, the bombers begin their journey into the overlapping fighter boxes that guard the approaches to Essen. Approaching the Dutch coast, the bombers encounter moderate to broken cloud and 40-mile-per-hour winds. The new moon is below the horizon tonight, making for exceptionally dark conditions, which help hide the bombers. The customary searchlight beams and flak burst from German coastal positions greets the bomber stream as it heads inland. Frightening, but tonight it claims no victims as the bombers push through the outer crust of the German defenses. The Luftwaffe is slow to react, and the coastal night fighting positions fail to claim any inbound bombers. But the main line of defense, the numbered boxes of the Kammhuber line, are occupied by experienced night fighter pilots. The ground control officer of position 5B guides a night fighter flown by Manfred Maurer to within range of a Pathfinder Lancaster and a Polish Wellington, allowing Maurer to shoot down both aircraft for his 17th and 18th victories. 2 more Halifaxes are shot down by their night fighters. But the high-flying Mosquitoes are not intercepted. The first drops its yellow indicators north of Essen before starting its run on the Krupp's works. Following on its heels are the main force bombers, which bank south of the yellow indicators and head into the formidable defenses guarding Essen. Moderate cloud coverage is encountered over the target area, and searchlights north and west of Essen sweep the skies. Intense heavy and light flak is encountered by the bombers, who look for red indicators in the thick smog below. At 20:58 hours, red target indicators cascade down from the first Mosquito right onto the Krupp's works below. Several early Halifax bombers from the first wave quickly drop their bombs and incendiaries on the red markers, beginning the first fires. Green indicators dropped by 4 engine Pathfinder crews keep the raid on track. As oboe failures and several Mosquitoes mean no red indicators fall for 23 minutes. Ron Reed is awed by the spectacle.
On the way in, it looked quite frightening from afar. There was solid flak ahead, and there was already plenty of fighter activity. We got there on time. Pathfinder flares were going down as we made the target area. We had a good run-up, although it was through the heaviest flak we'd yet encountered. We dropped our bombs accurately on the flares below. We couldn't see the target itself, as the usual haze covered Essen, but it looked as though there were heavy fires breaking out.
Mixed in with the first wave Halifaxes are some Sterlings and Wellingtons which have arrived up to 10 minutes early. Shortly, fires take hold in the Krupp's works and residential center of Essen, spreading north and northeast as creepback develops along the length of the bomber stream. Several massive explosions are seen by crews during the raid as gasworks and other facilities are struck by bombs. The intense flak and searchlight activity makes its presence felt, and low-flying Sterlings and Wellingtons suffer from the ground defenses. One Wellington pilot recalls,
Ruhr searchlights held us in their beams for 5 minutes. We were hit time and again, and when we landed, our Wellington looked like the top of a pepper pot.
As the raid progresses, the defenses degrade as the flak and searchlights are overwhelmed by the scale and concentration of the attack. The Lancasters begin to arrive at 21:10 to deliver the final blasting to Essen with their 4,000-pound blast bombs and incendiaries. John Searby is amongst them.
And that massive destruction below us, the play of light and color, might well have inspired an artist to perform some great work depicting the death throes of a city. For that is what it represented. Great outbreaks of fire, with smoke billowing up to hide. The weaving patterns induced by the cold fingers of the searchlights, muzzle flashes and bomb bursts, the distinctive sudden glow from exploding photo flashes, and the vast carpet of diamond points where the thousands of 4-pound incendiary bombs had landed. And amid this frightful holocaust, the red and green target indicators descending slowly to the ground.
By 2140 hours, the last of the bombers fly away as Essen burns. Turning for home, the compact bomber stream begins to disperse as the bombers run the gauntlet of German night fighter boxes. One damaged Halifax flying outside the bomber stream is shot down near Nijmegen. A homeward bound Sterling falls victim to coastal flak. Night fighters occupying the coastal boxes claim 6 homeward bound bombers. Helmut Lent, the Luftwaffe's top-scoring night fighter pilot, is guided to a Halifax and Lancaster by his ground control officer, shooting down both for his 60th and 61st victories. But not all goes the night fighter's way tonight. Radio jamming by tinsel operators aboard the bombers jammed communications between several ground control officers and night fighter pilots, preventing a number of guided interceptions in the dark, moonless night. 21 bombers spot and evade approaching night fighters, while 8 bombers survive attacks with a mixture of evasive maneuvers and defensive fire. A Wellington from 305 Squadron claims the destruction of an Me-110. Essen has been devastated. Photo reconnaissance the next day shows extensive damage to the important Krupp's works, with some 130,000 square yards of the facility devastated. Other damage to industrial and residential areas are also apparent. The Mine Lane Mission 2 is a success. 3 Halifaxes and 2 Wellingtons successfully laid 14 sea mines off the Frisian Islands without loss. At Bomber Command HQ, analysts pore over the data to assess the raid. Of the 442 bombers dispatched for Essen, 56 are recorded as having turned back before reaching the target, largely due to mechanical failures. 367 bomber crews report having attacked Essen, and 41% of bombing photographs are plotted within 3 miles of the aiming point. 3, 4, and 6 group, whose aircrafts are present in the first 2 waves, are most accurate, with 60% of their bombs falling within 3 miles of the aiming point. 5 Group Lancasters in the final wave dropped just 27% of their bombs within 3 miles, suggesting the raid became increasingly scattered as it progressed. Nevertheless, the density of towns and cities in the Ruhr means much of the scattered bombing still falls on built-up areas, dehousing many Germans. 14 bombers failed to return from the Essen raid, some 3.2% of the force. 9 fall to German night fighters while 5 fall to flak, mainly over the Ruhr. Despite efforts to determine the causes of the losses using radio intercepts and crew reports, Bomber Command can only confirm 5 losses to night fighters and 4 losses to flak. The dark night which hides RAF bombers from German fighters also hides the fates of many RAF bombers that never return, and the remaining 5 losses are categorized as lost to unknown causes. RAF radio intercepts indicate that Tinsel remains effective at jamming some of the German communications, preventing interceptions. Harris congratulates his men.
The attack on Essen has now inflicted such vast damage that it will in due course take precedence as the greatest victory achieved on any front. You have set a fire in the belly of Germany which will burn the black heart out of Nazism and wither its grasping limbs at the very roots. Such attacks, which will continue in crescendo, will progressively make it more and more impossible for the enemy to further his aggressions or to hold where he now stands. The great skill and high courage with which you press home to your objectives has already impressed the inevitability of disaster on the whole of Germany, and, with the next few months, the hopelessness of their situation will be borne in upon them in a manner which will destroy their capacity for resistance and break their hearts.
Coming on the heels of several successful RAF raids so far this year, the damage to Essen shakes the Nazi government, with Reich's propaganda minister Josef Goebbels reporting,
The city of Krupp had been hard hit. The number of dead too is considerable. If the English continue their raids on this scale, it will make things exceedingly difficult for us. The dangerous thing about this matter, looking at it psychologically, is the fact that the population can see no way of doing anything about it. Our anti-aircraft guns are inadequate. The success of our night pursuit planes, so notable, are not sufficient to compel the English to desist from their night attacks. As we lack a weapon for attack, we cannot do anything noteworthy in the way of reprisals. According to the Security Service report, the air war is viewed with extreme concern throughout the nation. The morale is described as good in the bombed cities, but as is also explained, the people are asking about the possibilities for retaliation. Retaliation, after all, is the only means, as things stand, of bringing the English to their senses.
As tired crews settle in for debriefing, food, and sleep, the well-oiled replacement system kicks into gear at Bomber Command bases. At Linton-on-Ouse, Ronald Reed's 78 Squadron and its sister 76 Squadron each lose one Halifax, but the crews take heart from what was clearly a successful attack.
We learned that for the very first time, the Krupp's work was severely damaged by our efforts. We felt quite proud of ourselves.
Keen to hit Essen again while the city reels, Harris orders a follow-up attack for the next night, but the weather turns for the worse, and the raid has to be cancelled as the planes sit on the runway. The next day, fog is forecasted over Pathfinder air bases, preventing any possibility of a raid for that night. Instead, 20 Halifaxes and Wellingtons of 4 Group are dispatched to lay mines off the Frisian Islands. 2 bombers, some 10% of the force, are lost to patrolling night fighters in position Tiger and Jaguar. The mine-laying missions are not always easy trips. With the period of moonless nights soon ending, and clear skies predicted over central and southern Germany on March 8th, Harris decides to switch his focus. Nuremberg. The city of Nazi Party rallies will be attacked. An important political target, Nuremberg is also a major communication hub in the region connecting north, south, and east-west rail traffic. Among the 18 aluminum, engineering, and armaments works listed in Nuremberg are the MAN works producing tanks and diesel engines, the G. Müller works producing special ball bearings for magnetos, and the Fondwerks producing heavy vehicles and artillery tractors. Nuremberg lies deep within Germany and will soon be off-limits to attacks by Bomber Command as the nights shorten with the arrival of spring. An attack here will also force the Germans to keep flak and night fighter forces committed in southern Germany, well away from the Ruhr. Crews who find their names on the battle order for the night gather in their briefing huts to hear where they will be sent. John Searby from 106 Squadron is among them, flying his 7th bombing raid in just 14 days. In order to bypass most of the known German defenses, the bomber stream is routed south below the night fighter boxes in Belgium. 2 turning points are plotted, one at Caillou on the French coast, the other at Speyer in Germany, which will be marked by Pathfinders. The routes preclude the use of twin-engine Wellingtons, leaving 335 Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Stirlings to deliver the attack. Nuremberg lies outside the range of Obo, so the city will be marked by Pathfinder aircraft equipped with H-2S ground mapping radar, so-called Y aircraft. The Y aircraft will drop yellow indicators at Speyer to aid in navigation for the main force bombers. Then, prior to 0 hour, 5 Y aircraft will lay sticks of illumination flares across Nuremberg so 9 other Y aircraft can attempt to visually mark Nuremberg city center, the aiming point, with green indicators. If the aiming point is obscured by haze, then the Y aircraft will attempt to bomb using their H-2S radar, dropping red indicators to signal they are conducting a blind bombing attack. Pathfinder aircraft without H-2S will act as backers up, attacking at intervals of 1 minute and dropping their green indicators on the aiming point if it is illuminated by flares, or at the center of the already burning indicators if it is not. The 335 main force bombers will once again attack in 3 waves, with 88 Halifaxes bombing between 23:19 and 23:30 hours, 53 Stirlings attacking between 23:25 and 23:35 hours, and 157 Lancasters attacking between 23:30 and 23:45 hours. The crews are instructed to aim at the middle of the burning indicators irrespective of color, and to not rely on visual identification of ground detail. 4 Obo Mosquitoes will launch nuisance raids on the Ruhr, and 16 Wellingtons from 6th Group will each drop mines off the Frisian Islands. With the briefings concluded, tense crews steel themselves for the task ahead. Kit on, pre-flight routine and good luck rituals completed, with green lights flashing from control towers, the bombers rolled down the runways for Germany. Crossing the French coast, the thick cloud cover over the channel rapidly disperses inland, resulting in clear skies all the way to Nuremberg. The crescent moon dips below the horizon behind the bombers, creating exceptionally dark conditions which will help conceal the bombers during their long journey over Germany. It's not until the bomber stream reaches the numbered fighter boxes of the Kammhuber line that the first German night fighters are encountered. Despite RAF radio jamming, several night fighters are guided by ground controllers to the outbound bombers, and 2 Sterlings and a Halifax fall to fighters of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4. A 35 Squadron Halifax narrowly avoids becoming a 4th victim.
Our aircraft was attacked by a Ju-88 from starboard quarter below at approximately 250-yard range. Enemy aircraft opening up with a long burst of cannon and machine gun fire. Our aircraft went into a corkscrew and the enemy aircraft got in a second burst of the starboard quarter, and our rear gunner got in a short burst at approximately 150-yard range. Further attacks by enemy aircraft were successfully avoided.
Encountered next are the named boxes patrolled by fighters of Nachtjagdgeschwader 101. Jamming of Freya radars and German radio communications is particularly effective here, as the night fighters of NJG 101 do not have Liechtenstein airborne radar on their fighters. Several interception attempts occur, but NJG 101 shoots down no outbound bombers. As planned, Pathfinder aircraft mark a point near Speyer with yellow indicators, and a Sterling is shot down by a fighter of NJG 4 in the area. Searchlights and heavy flak batteries are encountered by the aircraft passing by several major cities. Arriving over the target, the Pathfinders find that although Nuremberg is free of clouds, the moonless sky and hazy ground conditions reduce visibility on the ground to almost nothing. An estimated 100 searchlights are active in or around Nuremberg. The Pathfinder marking plan begins to come apart as only 5 of the 14Y aircraft have arrived on time. Almost half the Pathfinder H2S sets are now not working, while many sets that are working do not return proper radar images due to insensitivity. As a result, insufficient numbers of illumination flares are dropped by the flare lane Y aircraft prior to the start of the attack, making visual identification of the aiming point by following Pathfinder aircraft extremely difficult. Many of the Halifaxes of the first wave are also late, so just 22 bombers are on hand to bomb on the first target markers. During the first 10 minutes, target indicators fall on outlying villages 2 to 3 miles north of the aiming point, and on a forest 4.5 to 7 miles southeast of the aiming point. The mix of green and red indicators confuse many backers up who opt to remark the red indicators. However, due to the late arrival of many of the first wave Halifaxes, these errant markers burn out before they draw too many bomb loads. In the following 10 minutes, Pathfinder marking improves, with new indicators going down 1.5 to 2 miles northwest of the aiming point and 3.5 miles south-southeast. This coincides with the arrival of most of the attacking force, which drops their bombs on or around these markers. As the last wave of Lancasters arrive, bombing accuracy increases, with 2/3 of bombs falling within 3 miles of the aiming point. John Searby, flying amongst this wave, reports,
Thick haze, visibility fair, cluster of green TIs in sight. Bombed from 17,000 feet at 23:30 hours, and own bombs seemed to burst. Several large fires were noted, by then appeared to be rather scattered. Flak was fairly heavy in barrage form. No fighters were seen.
Despite early scattered marking by the Pathfinders, later more accurate marking and the late arrival of the main force results in a raid that becomes more accurate as time goes on. Night fighters are seen and 4 crews report approaches but no combats. 2 Lancasters are lost over Nuremberg, one being seen coned by searchlights and destroyed by heavy flak. The other Lancaster likely falls victim to flak as well. By midnight, the last of the bombers leave the burning city. Turning for home, the bomber stream retraces the path it took to Nuremberg. Crossing over Speyer, searchlights and flak are encountered. Nachtjagdgeschwader 101 again fails to shoot down any bombers due to jamming. Crossing back through the numbered boxes, a 35 Squadron Halifax is shot down by the crew of Oberleutnant Ludwig Meister for his 7th victory. His onboard radar operator recounts the attack.
At a range of 1300 meters, I acquired a target. Draw closer to it. No change in the Liechtenstein set, the dummy is flying very sedately. At 400 meters range, Oberleutnant Meister can see the enemy machine. My pilot puts a burst into it from red astern and promptly moves off to port engine. The dummy's tail turret is burning and the fire is spreading further along the fuselage. The second and third attacks enlarge the fire and the parachute whizzes past our wing. The fourth attack finally produces the explosion. Burning, the hostile plane dives into the depths. Impact on the ground, and now we must go home. Our time's up.
Surviving bomber crews report 29 approaches and 6 combats with night fighters, and 3 bombers return to base with fighter damage. 2 Sterling gunners each claim the destruction of a night fighter. Nuremberg suffers significant damage. Photo reconnaissance pictures show that though the city center has avoided serious damage, concentrated bombing on the suburbs have hit many important war industries. The Siemens Work is badly hit, as is the MAN Works producing Panther tanks for the upcoming Kursk offensive. Aluminum, radio, gas works, and chemical producers are hit, as well as railway yards and military barracks. The old city center of Nuremberg suffers 2 areas of severe devastation, and several hundred residential buildings are destroyed. The mine-laying effort is also successful, with 11 bombers successfully laying 22 mines around the Frisian Islands. RAF analysis of the raid shows that of the 335 aircraft dispatched, 30 turned back due to various reasons, and 294 claimed to attack the primary target. Of this, 47% placed their bombs within 3 miles of the aiming point. 5 Group Lancasters flying in the final wave are able to take advantage of the more accurate later marking and deposit 62% of their ordnance within 3 miles of the aiming point. None of the mine-laying bombers nor oboe mosquitoes launching nuisance raids on the Ruhr are lost. However, 8 RAF bombers failed to return from the attack on Nuremberg, 2.4% of the force dispatched. 5 fall to night fighters while 2 fall to flak, and 1 is lost in an accident. Based off radio intercepts and crew reports, Bomber Command can only estimate 3 losses to fighters, 2 losses to flak, and the rest to unknown causes. RAF jamming effectiveness is again noted as having interrupted German defenses. Joseph Goebbels receives news of the raid during a gathering with Hitler.
In the course of the late evening, we received news that Nuremberg has suffered a heavy air attack. The Fuhrer is very concerned about the fate of the city. I called Nuremberg twice to get a report. The damage is not as great as we had first feared. The Fuhrer had General Bodenschatz brought out of bed to give him the most serious reproaches about the air war. He was with Göring, and, on behalf of the Fuhrer, informed him of the grave concerns the Fuhrer had about the developments of the air war. In any case, the Fuhrer is extremely dissatisfied with the current state of affairs, and he expresses his displeasure in the most open-hearted manner. The Fuhrer rightly takes the position that we must intervene in the air war under all circumstances. We can no longer afford to let this question drag on. It would result in a very serious collapse of morale, apart from the material damage that would be done by it.
Harris decides to continue his raids into southern Germany to reinforce the threat there and pressure the Germans to spread out their defenses. Munich, the birthplace of the Nazi movement and the largest city in Bavaria and 4th largest city in Germany, will be attacked next. Munich is a noted focal point for the German railway system in that region and contains 7 transportation targets. Munich also contains 8 important aircraft industry-related targets, including the BMW aero engine factory located in the north of the city. 15 engineering and armament facilities, 9 chemical works, and several utility, rubber, and foodstuff facilities round out the noted war-related industries. Weather forecasts are promising, with few of any clouds forecasted over southern Germany. The crescent moon will be below the horizon for most of the bombers' long journey to Munich, increasing their odds of evading German night fighters. The route chosen is similar to the previous night's attack on Nuremberg, as Munich lies only 100 miles to the south. 2 turns are plotted, one near Dieppe on the French coast, the second marked by Pathfinders at the northern tip of the Ammer See. White target markers will be dropped at Puy on the way to Munich and at Haslau on the way back to England to aid in navigation. Only Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Sterlings will be sent. The crews of 264 bombers awake on March 9th to find their names on the battle order for tonight. Filing into the briefing huts that evening, they sit and listen to the details of tonight's attack. John Searby leads 106 Squadron's briefing tonight at RAF Syerston, while Ron Reed sits and listens to his own commanding officer's briefing at Linton-on-Ouse. Incorporating lessons of the previous night's attack, the Pathfinders will open this attack with 13 H-2S equipped Y aircraft marking Munich with red indicators, while also laying a curtain of white illumination flares across the target area 1 minute before 0 hour. 16 backer ops following behind at 1 to 2 minute intervals will drop green target markers on the aiming point if they can visually identify it, or aim at the center of all red indicators if they cannot. Due to problems illuminating Nuremberg the previous night, additional flares will be carried by 2 backers up to supplement the initial illumination effort if required. The main force will open their attack at 23:49 and end at 24:15 hours, some 26 minutes. To prevent the undershooting of bombs seen the previous night, the aircraft will make a timed bomb run from the Ammer Z to Munich. When over Munich, the main force will aim at the center of the burning indicators and not attempt to visually identify the target. The attacking force is divided into 4 waves, 44 Lancasters from one group attacking from 23:49 to 2400 hours, 83 Lancasters from 4 and 6 group attacking from 23:53 to 24:03 hours, 40 Sterlings of 3 group attacking from 23:55 to 24:05 hours, and finally 86 Lancasters from 6 group attacking from 24:03 to 24:15 hours. Concurrently, a major mine laying effort by 62 aircraft, mostly Wellingtons, will attempt to lay over 150 mines off Kiel, the Little Belt, Heligoland Bight, the Frisian Islands, and the Bay of Biscay. 8 Obo Mosquitoes will also launch harassing raids on several Ruhr cities this night. Briefings concluded, the crews kit up and head for their aircraft. John Searby, feeling the effects of flying his 8th raid in 16 days, fills his jacket pocket with caffeine pills to combat the drowsiness. His Lancaster joins the queue of 8 others on the runway at RAF Syerston. Throwing 2 bitter-tasting caffeine pills into his mouth, Searby opens the throttle and his bomb-laden Lancaster rumbles down the runway to join 263 other bombers heading for Germany. Crossing the coast at Dieppe, the bomber stream encounters little cloud from the coast all the way to Munich. The crescent moon sits low in the sky to the rear of the bomber stream, before dipping below the horizon 1 hour before the bombers reach Munich. However, unforecasted winds are encountered which upset the timing of the raid. The bombers first encounter resistance at the numbered boxes of the Kamm-Huber line. The fighters of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4 shoot down a Sterling before the bomber stream passes through the German positions. Flak and searchlights are encountered as some bombers stray over major cities along the route to Munich.
Over France, all was quiet. But nearing Saarbrücken, we saw the waving spears of the searchlights and the flicker of shell bursts. I kept well south of the frontiers to the Rhine, then passed south of Stuttgart, where there was much activity.
Entering the southern named boxes, the bomber stream encounters elements of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4, along with Nachtjagdgeschwader 101. While one fighter from NJG-4 shoots down a Lancaster, the combination of jamming and the moonless night again neutralizes the efforts of NJG-101, who lack their own onboard radar.
Operating 9 aircraft. No contacts with the enemy. From the enemy side, powerful jamming of all Freiers and RT in all CGI boxes. 30 minutes prior to start and at the time of the through flights, from 22:25 to 1:31. Engagement of enemy aircraft in area without Liechtenstein equipment made harder by lack of moonlight.
Continuing on, a Halifax, possibly damaged and seeking safe haven in neutral Switzerland, crashes into Lake Constance, killing the entire crew. Approaching Munich, the Ammer Z shows up clearly on the Y aircraft's H-2S sets, and green and white flares cascade down at the northern tip of the lake, identifying the starting point for the bombing run on Munich. Approaching the target, the Pathfinders find ground haze and darkness obscuring Munich. Only 7 of the 13 Y aircraft have arrived over the target, and of that, only 3 have functioning H-2S sets. As a result, too few illumination flares are falling over Munich to adequately illuminate it for visual marking by the backers up. Unexpectedly strong radar returns from recent suburban construction deformed the image of Munich on H-2S screens and caused the first 2 Y aircraft to drop red indicators 4 miles north-northwest of the aiming point at 24:03 hours. Several backers up, unable to visually identify the aiming point in the light of the few burning illumination flares, drop green indicators as ordered on the only visible red indicators they see. At 12 minutes past midnight, a Y aircraft drops their red indicators and flares 1/2 mile north of the aiming point, but it is too late. At least 40 bombers from the various waves have bombed on the concentration of red and green indicators 4 miles north-northwest of the aiming point, drawing the rest of the bomber stream to the conflagration. Ron Reed is among those crews drawn north by the errant markers. His bombing photo is plotted 4 miles north-northwest of the aiming point.
Target was bombed from 1,500 feet at 012 hours. Identified visually by the river and the PFF marker. Ground markers were in bomb sight at time of release. Huge explosion was seen north of Marshalling Yard, lighting up the whole target. The glow of the fire could be seen 80 to 100 miles away from the aiming point.
15 minutes past midnight, the center of the attack begins to shift southwest, resulting in a gas holding facility exploding spectacularly. The rest of the bombing occurs in this area, drifting slightly southwest for the next 25 minutes. John Searby and his crew arrives 10 minutes after Reed.
A marked change in the quality of the opposition had taken place since our December raid. The flak was heavier, and a whole forest of searchlight beams lit up the scene. Already the smoke from fires was rising to great heights, and amidst the clutter below, the red indicators showed up plainly. Clear, thick ground haze and smoke. Target was identified by red and green target indicators, and 2 green TIs were in sights when bombing from 17,000 feet at 022 hours. Saw 4,000-pound bomb burst. Attack was fairly well concentrated, and 1 big explosion was noted.
After 50 minutes, the attack is over and the bomber stream leaves sections of Munich burning as they head back to their bases. Leaving Munich, the bombers head back to England on the same route they flew in on. Passing south of Stuttgart, additional white indicators are dropped to aid the main force's navigation. The jamming of Moonless Night prevents Nachtjagdgeschwader 101 from achieving any kills against the homeward-bound bombers. However, the fighters of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4 exact some measure of retribution. 4 bombers are shot down as the bomber stream passes through the numbered boxes of the Kamm-Huber line. The future top-scoring crew of NJG-4, Oberfeldwebel Reinhard Kolak and Fieldwebel Hermann, are guided by ground control to 2 Lancasters, resulting in Kolak's 13th and 14th victories. 6 RAF bombers survive attacks from German night fighters, while 15 other bombers evade approaching night fighters. The rear gunner of a 149 Squadron Sterling successfully fights off an attacking Ju-88, saving his crew, but at the cost of his own life as his gun turret is shot to pieces in the engagement. Munich suffers major damage. Photo reconnaissance shows that while the residential center escapes heavy damage, bombing in the northwest and western districts hits many industrial and military facilities. The BMW factory assembling aero engines is put out of action for 6 weeks. Also hit is the Mannheim Works producing submarine engines, the Max Foch Works producing sheet metal, the Krauss Works producing locomotive and armored cars, and the J. Radgeber Works producing railway wagons. 294 military buildings and 141 small workshops are hit or destroyed. 14 cultural buildings, 4 churches, the cathedral, 11 hospitals, and 291 other residential buildings are destroyed, as is the Nazi Party headquarters and Hitler's Munich apartment. The mine-laying mission sees 47 of 62 bombers lay 115 sea mines, and all 8 oboe mosquitoes deposit their bombs over the Ruhr. RAF analysis shows that of the 264 aircraft dispatched to Munich, 32 turned back due to mainly technical problems, and 218 attacked the primary target. Of this, 52% of crews placed their bombs within 3 miles of the aiming point. Performance between the groups was roughly similar, with most placing 50 to 60% of their ordnance within 3 miles of the aiming point. Analysis of the pathfinding marking leads to criticism of the night's Pathfinder crews. Despite the inaccurate wind forecast that threw off the timing run from the Amber Z, it was felt the Pathfinder crews should have recognized the error from the image on their H2S screens. Notably, the airdrome north of Munich showed up clearly on the H2S screens and should have indicated to the Pathfinder crews they were too far north. All Obo Mosquitoes returned to base, while 3 mine lane Wellingtons were lost, 1 to fighters and 2 to flak, a loss rate of 4.5%. 8 bombers from the Munich raid are lost, 6 to night fighters and 2 to flak, some 3% of the force. Using radio intercepts and crew reports, Bomber Command estimates the Munich force suffers 5 losses to German fighters and 2 losses to flak, and 1 loss to unknown causes.
Amongst the German people, the main topic of discussion at the moment is the air war. Last night's attack on Munich was extraordinarily heavy. Many cultural monuments were damaged and even destroyed. Again, the question arises, how is this to continue? If the British are able to attack a German city night after night, it is easy to imagine what Germany will look like in about 3 months' time after these bombardments if we do nothing effective about it. In view of the steadily increasing English air attacks on German Reich territory, the Führer has ordered Göring from Rome to his headquarters. The meeting between the Führer and Göring will take place during the day. On this occasion, the Führer will bring to Göring's attention all his misgivings about the air war, and insist that we now try with all our energy to regain the initiative. I am told that the mood in the West German cities is somewhat cracked. One can imagine that the constantly repeated air raids are beginning to exert a certain influence on the moral attitude of the population.
Having launched 2 major operations in 2 nights, Harris stands down his forces on March 10th for rest and refit. Taking advantage of this lull, many squadrons send crews out on night flying training exercises, while bomb aimers from 424 Squadron Royal Canadian Air Force spend their afternoon in link training. The staff at 83 Squadron Pathfinders take a different course of action, ordering up a bus to take their crews to Cambridge for local celebrations and drink. However, the crews of 2 Obo Mosquitoes are sent to conduct nuisance raids over the Ruhr, while 20 Lancasters and 15 Sterlings from 3 and 5 Group are tasked to lay sea mines from Biscay to the Baltics. 3 experienced crews from 106 Squadron who had not flown the previous 3 raids are sent with this force. Both Obo Mosquitoes successfully bomb and return to base despite heavy flak and searchlight activity. 30 of the 35 mine layers lay 115 mines for the loss of 2 Lancasters and crews, both from 44 Squadron. With bad weather forecasted over the North Sea and northern Germany, but clear weather forecasted over southern Germany, Harris opts to continue his attacks on southern German cities. Stuttgart, the capital of Württemberg and the most important industrial city in southern Germany, will be attacked. Containing 5 aircraft or aero engine works, 35 engineering or armament works, 3 non-ferrous manufacturing works, 4 major utility works and 5 transportation facilities. Stuttgart is home to the Daimler-Benz works, the Bosch works, and the Norma and Esslinger Machine and Fabric works, which all produce between them aero engines, fuel injection pumps, magnetos, ball bearings, and locomotive engines. Broken cloud is predicted over France before clearing out over Germany. The crescent moon will sit low in the sky until 60 minutes after 0 hour, increasing the visibility of the bombers to German night fighters. A similar route to the one used on the Munich raid is chosen for tonight, as Stuttgart sits 230 kilometers west of Munich. 3 turns are plotted in order to route the bomber stream further south through the night fighter boxes in France. The first turn is plotted near Dieppe on the French coast, the second at Chalon-sur-Marne, and the third at Bischmiller. Why aircraft are to drop incendiaries over Baden-Baden on the way to Stuttgart to assist in navigation for the main force. Only Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Sterlings will be sent. The crew of 314 bombers find their names on the battle order for tonight. Taking their places at the briefing huts that evening, they sit and listen to the plan of attack. Once again, John Searby from 106 Squadron is taking part, his 9th raid in 18 nights. Ronald Reed from 78 Squadron also finds his name on the battle order, his 3rd raid in 6 days. Despite the flawed marking at Munich on March 9th, the Pathfinder marking plan was deemed sound and would be repeated tonight. 12 H-2S equipped Y aircraft will open the attack at 0-1 minute, dropping red indicators blindly on Stuttgart while releasing sticks of flares. 16 Pathfinder backers up will follow at 1 to 2 minute intervals, dropping green indicators on the aiming point if visible, or aiming at the center of burning red indicators if not. The main force will open their attack at 22:49 hours and end by 23:15 hours, some 26 minutes. The main force is again instructed to aim at the center of burning indicators, irrespective of color, and not attempt to visually identify the aiming point. The attacking force is divided into 4 waves, with 35 Halifaxes of 6th Group Royal Canadian Air Force bombing from 22:49 to 2300 hours, 67 Halifaxes of 4 Group bombing from 22:55 to 23:05 hours, 43 Sterlings of 3 Group bombing from 2300 to 23:10 hours, and 137 Lancasters of 1 and 5 Group bombing from 23:03 to 23:15 hours. Concurrently, 9 Sterlings from 3 Group and 3 Lancasters from 5 Group will drop sea mines off the Frisian Islands and west coast of France. Briefings concluded, the crews begin their familiar routine of kitting up and passing the time. At Linton-on-Ouse, the Halifaxes of 78 Squadron line up on the main runway, each awaiting their turn to get airborne. Drowned out by the roaring engines are the voices of Ron Reed and his crew, performing their good luck ritual by singing a song over the intercom. As their Halifax thunders down the runway, the intercom fills with the lyrics of "We're off on the road to Morocco."
On the road to Morocco, this taxi is tough on the spine. Beats the bus until it beats me where we're going, why we're going.
Crossing the French coast near Dieppe, 10 cloud is encountered over much of France before dispersing over Germany. John Searby notes worryingly that vapor trails are forming behind the high-flying Lancasters, visible in the moonlight and a dead giveaway to prowling night fighters. Tonight may not be so easy. Despite being routed further south, the bomber stream still encounters the numbered night fighting positions of the Kamhuber line. Several approaches are made by night fighters of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4, and a Pathfinder Sterling and 2 Halifaxes are shot down as the bomber stream passes through these positions. A Sterling from 149 Squadron is approached 4 times by German night fighters, successfully corkscrewing out of each approach.
Ju-88 as sighted by the mid-upper gunner on starboard quarter, approximately 700 yards away at the same height as our aircraft. Mid-upper gunner again gave commentary and ordered the captain to prepare to turn to starboard and lose height. Order go was given at 500 yards and the captain again did a rate 4 return to starboard through 90 degree, losing 300 feet. Enemy aircraft immediately broke away to port quarter above and was lost.
Entering the southern named night fighting positions, for the 3rd time, Mandrill and Tinsel jamming neutralizes the efforts of Nachtjagdgeschwader 101, who are unable to shoot down any of the approaching bombers. But a lone Halifax flying separate from the bomber stream is attacked by a night fighter of NJG-4, and the bomber and night fighter shoot each other down in the engagement. Arriving over the target, the bombers encounter scattered medium cloud and hazy ground conditions. The southwesterly approach to Stuttgart brings the Y aircraft over hilly terrain, which muddles the radar returns and limits the distance from which the city shows up on H-2S screens. However, over Stuttgart, the outline of the city shows up clearly on H-2S sets, allowing for accurate marking of the aiming point by the Y aircraft. 10 Y aircraft marked the aiming point accurately with their red indicators over a 15-minute period from 22:45 to 2300 hours. Starting at 22:50 hours, the backers up begin to arrive, dropping green indicators on the still burning red indicators, or the aiming point if they are able to identify it. However, some later marking by backers up falls wide of the aiming point, landing over 3 miles southwest of the target. The initially accurate pathfinding marking is for naught, however, as the main force arrives so late that most of the well-placed indicators have burnt out. For the first confirmed time, the Germans deploy red dummy indicators, which combined with errant green indicators dropped 3 miles southwest of the aiming point by backers up, draw much of the bombing to the southwest of Stuttgart. Ron Reed's bombardier is one of those misled, bombing on red indicators at 23:12 hours, minutes after the last Pathfinder red indicator dropped would have burnt out.
Target was attacked and bombed at 23:12 hours from a height of 1,500 feet, identified by PFF markers and flares. bombed concentration of green and red markers, and own bombs seemed to burst. About 10 fires developed northeast of the markers.
Leaving the target, Reed narrowly avoids an attacking night fighter.
A fighter attacked us unexpectedly on the way out. I was surprised, and I thought he had us cold. I flung the aircraft around, expecting a nasty battle, but we evaded him easily. We decided he must have been a sprog.
As the raid progresses, the bombing drifts 1 mile north of the initial concentration and 2 miles southwest towards the dummy indicators. The village of Weingen, 4 miles southwest of Stuttgart, is mistaken by many crews for Stuttgart, which is reinforced by a backers up which drops green indicators on it. John Searby is among those crews who unwittingly is drawn to the burning village.
Hazy over target. Target indicator bombs in sights. Bombs seen to explode and concentration of fires. Height of bombing 17,000 feet. Time 23:18 hours. There was a large concentration of fires, which seemed well northwest of aiming point.
During the raid, a bomber is seen spiraling down with the starboard inner engine on fire, likely hit by flak. By 23:35 hours, the raid ends, with most of the bomb load having been deposited on outlying villages or in the open countryside. Leaving Stuttgart, the Pathfinders drop incendiaries at Baden-Baden as a navigational aid for the bombers. Nachtjagdgeschwader 101 again fails to inflict any losses on the exfiltrating bombers, and a night fighter of Nachtjagdgeschwader 4 is shot down by the gunners of a Royal Canadian Air Force Halifax, killing the German crew.
Aircraft was attacked by a believed Messerschmitt 210. The rear gunner opened fire with long bursts and held it until the enemy aircraft broke away. Both the pilot and the rear gunner saw the aircraft go down in flames and explode on the ground. The enemy aircraft is claimed as destroyed.
Passing back through the numbered night fighting positions, more approaches and engagements occur, and NJG-4 shoots down 3 Halifaxes, a Sterling, and a Pathfinder Lancaster, while a Royal Canadian Air Force Halifax gunner shoots down a night fighter in return, killing the crew. Surviving bomber crews report 29 approaches and 5 follows by night fighters. 8 bombers survive full-blown attacks by night fighters with a mixture of evasive maneuvers and defensive fire. 5 of the bombers suffered damage during these attacks but managed to return to base. Stuttgart escapes serious damage. Photo reconnaissance the next day shows almost no damage to Stuttgart, while the village of Weingen is seen to have suffered severe damage. 3 other outlying villages in the area also show evidence of scattered damage from the errant bombing. The mine laying operations in comparison are a great success, with 13 aircraft depositing 71 mines around the Frisian Islands and Gironde. RAF analysis shows that of the 314 aircraft dispatched, 29 turned back due to various reasons, and 268 claimed to have bombed the primary target. Of this, 32% placed their bombs within 3 miles of the aiming point. Looking at the timekeeping records of the raid, the operational research section notes that many of the late arriving main force crews claimed to have bombed on red and green indicators long after the Pathfinder indicators would have burnt out. Evidence was now building that the Germans were beginning to use decoy indicators, designed to resemble Pathfinder indicators and meant to draw bombing away from their cities. All the mine-laying aircraft returned successfully, but 11 aircraft attacking Stuttgart failed to return, 3.5% of the force. 9 fall to night fighters, while 2 fall to flak. 405 Squadron Royal Canadian Air Force suffers exceptionally badly, losing 4 of the 15 bombers it dispatches on this, its first raid with Bomber Command since returning from duty with Coastal Command. Based off sightings and radio intercepts, Bomber Command estimates at least 7 losses to fighters and possibly 3 losses to flak. Evidence of effective jamming of German radio communication was again noted. The failure of the raid is noticed by Josef Goebbels, who records in his diary,
"In addition to disruptive flights during the day, the British were in southwestern Germany at night with 150 planes. a stronger group attacked Stuttgart. Because of fogging, industrial installations could not be accurately located, so that no major damage was done there. Mainly, residential districts have been hit. According to reports so far, 42 were killed and 117 wounded. 10 enemy planes were shot down by night fighters, 1 by flak.
Having now attacked 3 cities deep in southern Germany in 4 nights, Harris turns his gaze elsewhere. The below-average losses his bombers have suffered on these raids demonstrated the weakness of German defenses in the region, and it was hoped the Germans would be forced to deploy more night fighters and flak units to southern Germany now that the threat to the region had been established. While the attack on Stuttgart was a complete failure, and the attacks on Munich and Nuremberg only partially successful, the raids nevertheless proved useful experience for Bomber Command on how to utilize the still new H2S ground mapping radar, which had only come into service a month prior. In particular, Bomber Command had largely worked out the pathfinding marking technique it would use to mark and illuminate German cities in the coming months when using H2S radar. The seeds of far more calamitous and infamous future attacks on German cities had been sown in these rather unspectacular raids. For the moment, however, Obo remained the RAF's most promising electronic bombing aid, and Harris turns his sights back to the Ruhr. Bad weather had prevented a follow-up raid on Essen on March 6th, but with good weather forecasted on March 12th, Harris chooses tonight to launch his follow-up attack on Essen with a maximum effort. At Linton-on-Ouse, Ron Reed desperately hopes for a night off after flying 5 bombing raids in 9 nights. Much to his chagrin, he is informed by his squadron leader that he's on for tonight.
Sorry blokes, we're on again tonight, maximum effort.
For John Searby, the news he is also flying tonight comes with an additional note. Guy Gibson, 106 Squadron's commander, is being posted away from the squadron. Searby, currently in command of one of the squadron's 2 flights, will succeed Gibson and take command of the whole squadron. Gibson himself is headed for RAF Scampton to take command of a new unit simply known as 617 Squadron. Across England, 457 crews file into the briefing huts to hear tonight's target. At Linton-on-Ouse, Ron Reed and the crews of 76 and 78 Squadron are briefed by 76 Squadron leader Leonard Chester. Reed is horrified when he hears the target.
Gentlemen, our target for tonight is Essen. Klug. Our hearts dropped. There it lay at the end of the red ribbon, delineating our route passing through the massed red hatched areas, indicating the heavy anti-aircraft defense and fighters of the Kamuba line.
The attack is planned as an almost exact copy of the March 5th attack on Essen. As with the previous raid, the bombers will be sent on the shortest and most direct route to Essen. 2 turning points are plotted, one at the Dutch coast and the other north of Essen, which will be marked with white indicators dropped by Obo Mosquitoes and backed up by 4-engine Pathfinder crews. 7 Obo-equipped Mosquitoes will be tasked with marking the Krupp's works. Spread throughout the raid, they will drop red indicators every 3 to 6 minutes, beginning at 21:15 hours. 16 Pathfinder crews flying 4-engine bombers will remark the red indicators with their own green indicators every 1 to 2 minutes thereafter, to ensure continuous marking of the aiming point. If no red indicators are seen, the crews are to drop their own indicators on any burning green indicators they see. The 457 main force bombers will attack in 3 waves, with 88 Halifaxes of 4 and 6 groups attacking from 21:19 to 21:35 hours, 158 Wellingtons and 40 Sterlings from 1, 3, 4, and 6 groups attacking between 21:30 and 21:40 hours, and 140 Lancasters attacking from 21:35 to 21:55 hours. The bombers are to bomb on red indicators if visible, or at the concentration of green indicators if no reds are visible. Concurrently, 9 Sterlings of 3 group will lay sea mines off the Frisian Islands, and 4 Wellingtons and 3 Whitley bombers from 93 Training Group will release leaflets over France. Filing out of the briefing, Ron Reed and the other crews head for their pre-operational meal of eggs and bacon. His friend, Morty Mortensen, shares his dark sense of humor, observing,
The condemned man ate a hearty breakfast. We ignored him and chewed doggedly on. By now, the knot in my stomach was reaching the size of a hen's egg, and the bacon tasted like leather.
At RAF bases, pre-flight rituals are carried out, well-known jokes are told at the change houses, crews laughing at them as best they can. Loaded onto the truck, the crews head for their bombers to begin their pre-flight checks. And then green Very lamp signal startup, the bombers roll down the perimeter track for the runway.
The green lamp from the runway control van cleared us for takeoff, giving a quick wave to those lucky people assembled inside the control van to see us off. I opened the throttles, and we were away. Sluggishly and slowly, the Halifax came to life. Then, wheels up and off on the long, slow, bomb-laden climb that would not stop until we were somewhere over Holland.
Crossing the Dutch coast, the bombers encounter clear skies from the North Sea all the way to Essen. The quarter moon sits high above the horizon, casting a reflective glow on the bombers and the ground below them. The coastal flak and searchlights find no victims among the inbound bombers as the bomber stream passes over the coastal positions. Just as on March 5th, the German night defenses react slowly to the incursion, and the bomber stream is well inland before the first combats occur. A Sterling F-15 squadron is engaged by a night fighter near S. Hertha Hombos, which opens fire from 600 meters and closes to 200 meters. The rear gunner, Sergeant Peters, returns fire, causing the fighter to catch fire and explode, killing the crew. However, 6 RAF bombers are shot down while heading to Essen by night fighters. Among them are 2 Halifaxes from the first wave shot down by night fighter ace Manfred Moira. Ron Reed is flying in the first wave and sees the telltale signs of combat in the skies around him.
There were 1 or 2 bursts of air-to-air firing close to us, indicating fighters in action. We redoubled our lookout. Now well into the heavily defended areas of the Kammhuber line, the intensity of the flak was increasing. Just ahead of us was the Ruhr, and there it was, already an inferno of brilliant explosions, which appeared to fill the sky. Christ, it's worse than last time.
Arriving over Essen, the bombers find a clear sky but thick ground haze. The first red indicators fall on the aiming point at 21:15 hours, and the second 5 minutes later. They are rapidly followed by a number of green indicators which land close to the red indicators. As the main force bombers arrive, they encounter extremely intense flak and searchlight activity. The Halifaxes of the first wave fly into a veritable wall of flak and searchlights.
The flak was heavier than ever on the run-up. We were bounced around by the bursting shells below, and the stink of cordite from those bursting in front filled the cockpit. I clung onto the control to try to keep things level for old Harry, peering down through his bomb sight. Shrapnel rattled against the fuselage. I could see the marker flares ahead quite clearly, and so could Harry, as I opened the bomb doors and told him we were all his. "Okay, Skip, I've got the markers in line." "Steady. Hold it at that." Just as he said it, we got a roaring bang under the tail that pushed the nose down and way off to the left. "Right, come right. You're a long way off. Come around about 10 degrees right, quick," called Harry. I stopped on the rudders and swung us around. We were still a bit off to the left. The marker flares had disappeared under the nose, but there were plenty to see. Some aircraft had already dropped their loads, and fires were lighting up the ground. Among them, I could see the flashes of HE bombs exploding. "Okay, Skip, it's coming up now. Steady, steady, steady." I thought he'd never stop saying steady. Essen was at its worst. We were still bouncing around from the flak, and I was sure Harry was overshooting. "Come on, Harry, for Christ's sake! How much further?" Harry was not to be hurried, and I shouldn't have been impatient, but... "Just a little more left, a little. Steady, steady." Just as I reached the bursting point. "Bomb's gone," he called.
From 21:15 to 21:30 hours, the bombing is concentrated on the Krupp's works in the area west and northwest of the aiming point. 8 of the 17 bomb photos taken by 4 Group, which identified ground detail, show the Krupp's works itself, attesting to the accurate marking by the Yobo mosquitoes. Several large explosions occur as gas works and combustible facilities are struck. However, beginning at 21:30 hours, the bombing begins to fall short to the north and northeast of the aiming point. German decoy indicators again make an appearance, causing many of the Stirling and Wellington crews to drop their bombs miles north of the aiming point. However, accuracy improves with the arrival of the third wave Lancasters, who are not drawn in by the decoys. John Searby, flying amongst the final wave, was struck by the intensity of the flak, which made it a
perfect hell of a night.
Unlike previous raids, the flak defenses seem to increase in effectiveness as the Lancasters arrive, and 4 Lancasters fall in flames over Essen. Nevertheless, the bombing remains concentrated, and 2/3 of the bombs fall on Essen this night. As the bombers leave the target area, Essen burns even more ferociously than it had during the previous raid 1 week earlier. Turning for home, the bombers run the gauntlet of night fighter positions and reinforced flak positions. Banking for home, Ron Reed is horrified by what he sees to his right.
I started a full turn right away. Just as I did, I saw sparks going forward over my turning starboard wing. Now, there were always sparks flying back from the engine exhaust when the engines were at full power, but these sparks were going forwards. Christ, they weren't sparks, they were tracer bullets. We had a fighter, which none of us had seen. I pushed the aircraft down into the flak-filled sky below and hoped for the best. Fortunately, the fighter either lost me or decided on discretion in not being shot down by his own flak.
Several more Lancasters follow the flak flying out of the Ruhr, while the cloudless sky and half-moon facilitates interceptions by night fighters who can visually pick up the bombers at longer range. The team of Oberleutnant von Bonin and K. Joden, flying in Box Gemse, are guided by radar ground control to a 76 Squadron Halifax.
I immediately went to attack from below and behind and fired from about 80 meters range. The 4 ancient enemy machine immediately burned brightly from the fuselage and the wing roots, but flew onwards. I therefore attacked again from the port side and let the burning aircraft fly through my fire from about 100 meters. The aircraft went down vertically immediately thereafter. I observed the crash at 21:40.
Manfred Maurer continues his killing streak, shooting down a Wellington for his 22nd victory and his 4th of the night. 5 more bombers fall to other night fighters as they fly through the German night fighter boxes between themselves and England. German coastal flak shoot down 2 Wellingtons into the sea before the bombers are out of reach of the German defenses. Behind them, the glow on the horizon denotes the hell they just returned from. Essen has again been devastated. Photo reconnaissance pictures taken shortly afterwards shows almost 50% more damage has been done to the Krupp's works than in the March 5th raid, some 196,000 square yards of the facility being devastated. The Krupp's locomotive works, one of the largest train works in Europe, suffers particularly with 96% of the facility damaged or destroyed. Other industrial facilities in Essen are hit, as well as the railway facilities, rolling stocks, and residential and commercial dwellings. The mine laying mission also goes well, with 9 Stirlings from 3 Group laying 50 mines off the Frisian Islands. RAF analysis of the raid shows 457 aircraft dispatched, 43 turning back for mostly technical reasons, and 384 claimed to have bombed the primary target. Of that, bombing photos suggest 58% put their ordnance within 3 miles of the aiming point. Once again, the operational research scientists determined the presence of German decoy indicators based off crew reports. All bombers employed on mine laying and leaflet sorties returned to base safely. However, 23 bombers failed to return from the attack on Essen, some 5% of the force dispatched, and the upper limit of what Bomber Command believes it can sustain without its squadrons losing combat effectiveness. 12 bombers fall to night fighters tonight, in comparison to the 9 bombers shot down by fighters on March 5th. 11 bombers fall to flak, compared with 5 bombers lost to flak on March 5th. Bomber Command, using crew reports and radio intercepts, estimates 10 losses to fighters and 10 losses to flak, with the remaining 3 bombers being lost to unknown causes. The presence of an almost half-full moon and no cloud cover also assisted night fighters in finding and destroying RAF bombers, despite more than half of the intercepted German radio communications being unintelligible because of tinsel jamming. Despite the raids into southern Germany the past few nights, it's clear the defenses in the Ruhr have been reinforced since the March 5th attack. In particular, the number of flak batteries and searchlight batteries have been heavily strengthened, accounting for a doubling of losses to flak this night. It remains to be seen whether the higher losses tonight are in fact a harbinger of things to come. Josef Goebbels receives news of the raid as it occurs.
In the course of the evening news comes another heavy air raid on Essen. This time the Krupp factories are hit hardest. I am still on the phone with the deputy Gauleiter Schlesman, who gives me a less than encouraging report. In the Kruppwerk area alone, there are about 25 major fires. The air war is currently our greatest concern. No sooner are we relieved of the worry about the Eastern Front than this new one comes along, which burdens us even more directly than that of last winter. But we must now devote all our energies to achieving a tangible result in the air war. Things cannot go on like this. The Fuhrer has told Göring his opinion in no uncertain terms. One must therefore now expect that Göring will do something decisive.
Having launched 7 major raids since the start of March, Harris orders a brief operational stand-down on March 13th. But this brief stand-down becomes an enforced 9-day break on operations as thick, persistent cloud descends upon England. Despite attempting to organize several major operations during this period, persistent fog over bomber bases forces Harris to cancel them all. The sudden halt in RAF bombing raids against Germany, which had averaged 1 attack every 2 to 3 days in February and March, creates an atmosphere of suspense and fear among the German population. As the Nazi government takes stock of the damage so far, rumors swirl throughout Germany about what the pause in RAF bombing raids mean.
The most important question that will be asked is that of the air war and total war. After all, the air war plays a decisive role in the general public discussion. The last air raid on Essen caused very serious damage at the Krupp plants, which will lead to a fairly large loss of production. With the rampant air raids on German cities, we are more and more short of craftsmen and also materials to make makeshift repairs to the damage. We are already forced to withdraw workmen's companies that were sent to Duisburg, for example, to Essen or Munich. They can only do the most necessary things and then have to be sent straight back to even more serious damage. In any case, the air war is beginning to give us serious cause for concern. In the West, a certain hopelessness is already spreading. Many here believe that the Reich government has already written off the West. Above all, the mood of the population is depressed by the question of what should happen next. Whether one should simply accept the air war without being able to do anything about it. In domestic politics, the air war is still of decisive importance. Although there have been no British air raids in the last few nights, the damage caused so far has been so great that we have our hands full trying to cope with it. Especially in Essen, the devastation is very great. The Heroes' Memorial Day will now take place next Sunday. I am having air raid precautions taken immediately, especially to ensure that under no circumstances will the Fuhrer be forced to interrupt his speech for the amusement of the English. It is interesting to note, by the way, that there have been no significant air raids in the past 4 nights. One puzzles over the causes. On the one hand, it is emphasized that the British do not like to attack in moonlight, since they are then too exposed to our night fighters. On the other hand, it is believed that they are preparing an invasion. And thirdly, it is feared that they are preparing a particularly heavy blow for Heroes' Memorial Day. The damage done at Krupp seems to be enormous after all. Speer intends to fly to Essen in the course of the afternoon to get a picture of the extent. On the other hand, however, we can state to our satisfaction that the industrial damage is not as difficult as the civil damage. Göring cannot understand why the British are not attacking the Ruhr without interruption, for here we are moving in parts through bottlenecks that harbor extraordinary dangers. Everywhere the question is being raised why the British did not make air raids on Reich territory during the last few nights. Whether the British intend to make a massive attack on Berlin on Heroes' Memorial Day? Who knows? With regard to the Heroes' Memorial Day, the Führer is determined to hold his speech even if the British should attempt an air attack. Whether they come or not about that, the Führer thinks we want to not worry about it. There's nothing we can do about it. In any case, all preparations, as far as they could be made at all, have been made. Florian has inspected the damage in Essen and described it as extraordinarily extensive. The British have done absolute precision work here, and even if the news that Krupp has been destroyed up to 80% is wildly exaggerated, we must prepare to accept very serious losses here. For Berlin, I am making total air raid protection preparations for Heroes' Memorial Day. Among other things, an absolute ban on leave for the Wehrmacht will be implemented for Berlin itself and for Potsdam. The fire departments from the surrounding towns have been put on alert. The whole family is still sitting up waiting for the English air raid. But, thank God it did not come. The English will probably not attack Berlin for psychological reasons, but partly the weather situation is also very bad. In England, there is ground fog, so that the planes cannot take off and cannot land. Perhaps the English have a surprise up their sleeve for us tomorrow evening, but this too must be accepted. The war brings new advantages every day, but also new disadvantages every day. We must face them with equanimity and a sovereign attitude. No English planes appear, as we had expected. It seems like the English do not feel like disturbing the Heroes' Memorial Day after all, as they would probably do poorly in world public opinion by doing so. The Führer is glad that the air war cannot have too strong an effect at the moment, but he is under no illusions. He knows that as soon as the weather improves, it will flare up again.
In comparison to the apprehension and fear within Germany, the 9-day operational pause is taken advantage of by the wary crews of Bomber Command. John Searby, now promoted to Wing Commander following Guy Gibson's departure, settles into his new role as commanding officer of 106 Squadron. Months earlier, Searby had joined 106 Squadron to take over B Flight when its commanding officer was killed on operations.
When I took over B Flight in 106 Squadron, the influence of the previous occupants stayed with me for quite a while. In fact, I began to doubt whether I would ever get rid of him. So firmly had he stamped his personality on B Flight. The blue woolen scarf left hanging in the steel clothing locker, and the doodles of the ancient blotting pad remained. I never knew him, but an ambience hung over the battered teak desk for many weeks.
Guy Gibson had run 106 Squadron for exactly 365 days before he departed, leaving Searby to wonder if he could ever make the squadron his own. With his new duties as squadron commander, and the fact he was 3/4 of the way through his bombing tour, Searby also looked forward to a slowdown in operations as he assumed a more managerial role. In fact, Searby would not fly any more operations this month. For Ron Reed and his crew, the 9-day lull was used for different purposes. On his second free night from operations, Reed and his crew treated their maintenance ground crew to a night at the Alice Hawthorne pub, a show of gratitude for the backbreaking work these men carried out to keep their Halifax bomber flight-worthy. Reed also received word that his girlfriend had been called up for the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, a relationship ender as she would be transferred far away for training. In a world where 81% of Halifax bomber crews could expect to be shot down on operations, the only viable relationships were those available now. While celebrating in a pub with his ground crew that night, Reed stumbles into Joan, the landlord's daughter, and
a little pixie of a girl, with a winsome smile and a good line in repartee.
It would be the start of a rapidly flourishing relationship that would burn out just as quickly as it started. Though Serbia and Reed would be spared operations during this period of inactivity, supplementary operations continued and Bomber Command crews continued to die. 4 of the 9 nights during this period saw mine laying operations, costing the command 3 bombers and their crews, who disappeared forever into the cold waters of the North Sea or Atlantic. Finally, on March 22nd, Harris got his first clear night in over a week. But for Germany, it would be another night of quiet, for the target in Bomber Command's crosshairs tonight was not in Germany, but France. With Allied shipping losses to the U-boat on the rise once again, Bomber Command was still bound by the war cabinet to assist the Admiralty. As a result, Harris would turn his attention back to St. Nazaire, home to the German 6th and 7th U-boat flotillas. For the first time, a French town would feel the effects of the RAF's new radio bombing aids. And for the first time, the oboe beams from England turned southwest to guide the oboe Mosquitoes and main force bombers to their new target.